6 months ago, I did something genuinely stupid, and I want it out of the way early so you know what kind of advice you're getting here. I had convinced myself that if I bought a beefier machine for my desk, I could run a big open source model at home and stop paying for API tokens every time I create one of these videos. So I built a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet agreed with me, which was easy because I was the one filling in the cells. I ordered the parts and spent 2 weeks feeling clever about it. The box arrived, I loaded a decent model onto it, and it crawled. 3 or 4 words a second, which is slow enough that you sit there watching the cursor and quietly review the decisions that led you to that chair. I had looked at exactly one number before buying, processor speed, and it turned out to matter almost not at all. What I'd built was an expensive paperweight with a fan in it. I'm telling you that because this week, Xiaomi, Alibaba, and Apple all either announced or shipped a machine built for that exact job, running big AI models on hardware you own instead of renting it by the token. And going through the coverage, I kept finding my own mistake in the headlines. Everybody is quoting one impressive number, and it is almost never the number that decides whether the thing is any good. So, what one of these boxes actually is, why the biggest number on the sticker tells you close to nothing, how to separate what Xiaomi demonstrated from what Xiaomi only claimed, and whether any of it deserves your money. I do have an answer to that last one, and it turns entirely on which model you're trying to run, which is the same lesson my paperweight taught me the slow way. Start with the mental model, because that's where I went wrong, and it's where a lot of this week's coverage is quietly going wrong too. A local AI box is a small computer built around a single shared pool of memory that both the processor and the graphics side can reach. That's the whole idea. It isn't a gaming PC with a big card wedged into it. It's one pool, shared by everything. NVIDIA's DGX Spark works this way, so do AMD's Strix Halo machines, and so does Apple's Big Memory Mac Studio. Think of that pool as a warehouse. How much it holds decides which models fit inside the building at all, and everyone gets that part right. Here's the part that got me. To produce a single word, the model has to haul all of its active weights out of the warehouse, through a door, and put them back again, then do it again for the next word. So the width of that door sets how fast the thing can actually talk to you. The processor, the number I fixated on, mostly just decides how quickly it reads your question before it starts answering. It was never the bottleneck, and I paid for that misunderstanding in full. 3 years ago, none of this was a conversation, because the ceiling on that kind of shared memory sat at about 24 gigabytes, and anything larger lived in the cloud. 2 things changed. Compression got good, so models could shrink without falling apart. And mixture of experts designs arrived, where a model stores hundreds of billions of parameters, but only wakes a small handful of them for any given word. Between them, capacity started mattering more than raw horsepower, which meant Apple had spent years accidentally building the right machine for a job that didn't exist yet. That shift is also why NVIDIA's own entry makes such a good lesson, because it prints the misleading number right on the packaging. The DGX Spark advertises 1 petaflop. Reviewers put a 70 billion parameter model on it and measured under 3 tokens a second. Nothing was broken. A petaflop measures compute, and compute is not what's holding you up. The figure that actually decides it is bandwidth, and the Spark moves 273 gigabytes a second through that door, while an RTX 5090 moves 1,792. Generation speed tracks door width almost 1-to-1. My paperweight, in hindsight, had a door roughly the size of a cat flap. You can watch that split apart in real numbers. One tester ran the same 30 billion parameter coding model on 3 machines and separated the 2 halves of the job. Reading the prompt, a Mac Mini managed 564 tokens a second, a Strix Halo box 342, and the Spark 2107. Then writing the answer, which is the half you actually sit and watch, 56, 73, 84. So the Spark completely dominates the part nobody looks at and barely edges ahead on the part everybody does, and its bandwidth number lands in the same neighborhood as a Mac Mini's. For $4,000, that's a machine having an identity crisis. So why is it selling? CUDA. A decade of software support that every AI tool targets first, which means the box on your desk speaks the same language as the data center you're probably going to rent anyway. The moat was never the silicon. It's the 10 years of software wrapped around it. Once you see that the moat is software, it gets obvious why Chinese companies are moving here, because they already own the software layer sitting above it. Pull up any leaderboard of open weight models and read the names: DeepSeek, Qwen, Kimi, GLM. All Chinese. DeepSeek recently gave away its own coding harness for free, tuned so that its own model performs best inside it. The models are Chinese, and the tooling around them increasingly is too. The box under your desk is the last layer in that stack nobody in Beijing owns, and it happens to be the layer carrying the fattest margin, which is what Xiaomi showed up with. And I need to be careful here, because this is exactly the trap I walked into. Getting excited about a number before asking what the number was measuring. Xiaomi launched 3 chips in one evening, including an accelerator called the O100 and a chip called the D100, built for self-driving cars, then dropped them into a prototype called the AI Cube. Aviation, aluminium, 33,000 cooling holes drilled through the case, and I'll admit, the thing is beautiful. The coverage blended together 4 very different categories, so let me pull them apart. What Xiaomi actually demonstrated on stage was the Cube running a 120 billion parameter model alongside a 3 billion one, switching between them live. What it claimed on a slide without showing was 1.22 terabytes a second of bandwidth and 330 tokens a second. What anybody outside the company has independently verified is nothing at all, because no outside reviewer has touched the thing. And what's shipping is none of it. No price, no date, and the chips don't go commercial until 2027. Read the claim closely and it thins out fast. That bandwidth figure is measured right up against the O100, and it gets there by stacking memory wafers directly on top of the processor. Clever engineering, but by one analyst's estimate, it only amounts to about 3 or 4 gigabytes of memory, which explains something odd about the demo. The fast one was running the tiny model, not the big one. And the 330 tokens a second is Xiaomi's own number on Xiaomi's own small model, while someone who saw the actual slides puts it at 295. So the story isn't that Xiaomi beat NVIDIA. What's interesting is that Xiaomi is attempting a genuinely different build. Stack the memory on top of the processor instead of beside it, and shorten the trip through the door. That's worth watching. Everything wrapped around it is still just a keynote. Alibaba gave us the same disease with a different number, and theirs is a small masterclass in how a figure can mislead you without ever being false. Their chip team said they had run a 27 billion parameter model at 30 tokens a second with no GPU required, and basically every outlet ran that sentence exactly as written. Here's what didn't make the sentence. It took 64 cores, with the model squeezed down to 4-bit, handling one request at a time on an unstated amount of memory in a setup that costs thousands of dollars. And those chips already have matrix engines built into them, which makes a plain CPU did this a very generous reading of events. That's 8 blanks hiding behind one headline, and you can't buy the chip anyway. I should be fair though, because that paragraph is also a description of my spreadsheet 6 months ago. One flattering number, no context around it, and a wallet already halfway out of my pocket. Which is why the checklist going around right now is genuinely useful. It's the thing I wish somebody had put in front of me before I ordered anything. Before you buy one of these, ask how much memory it has, what its measured bandwidth is rather than a summed up theoretical figure, which models actually fit, at what quantization, how fast it reads a prompt, how fast it writes an answer, which runtimes support the chip at all, what it really costs in stock, whether the memory can be upgraded later, almost always no, and how mature the software around it is. That last one deserves far more weight than it gets, because a chip with no runtime behind it is a brick with a fan on it. One YouTuber got 10 times the throughput out of the same box running the same model purely by fixing his serving software. With that list in hand, the pricing starts to look different. A Strix Halo machine gives you the same 128 gigabytes for roughly half what the Spark costs. And the day after Xiaomi's event, Apple quietly shipped a new Mac Studio that goes up to 512 gigabytes at over a terabyte a second, undercutting an equivalent NVIDIA workstation card that has less memory and doesn't come with a computer around it. But the detail that convinced me this category is honest underneath the marketing came from someone who built a 16-node Spark cluster. 2 terabytes of shared memory, about $75,000, sitting in a rack at home. The prompt reading numbers are spectacular. Generation sits at around 20 tokens a second, no matter what he throws at it. So his fix was to buy Mac Studios to do the actual generating and leave the Sparks handling the reading. The person with the largest Spark cluster on the internet went shopping at NVIDIA's competitor for the half his own machines are bad at. And I find that more useful than any benchmark chart. That same honesty shows up in the answer to who these are actually for, which came from someone running a pair of 3090s and a Spark cluster side by side. The big models, the ones he can only fit on the Spark, get used far more even though they're slower. When speed genuinely matters, he moves over to the 3090. But everything else, meaning most of his actual work, goes to the slow box. Speed buys you nothing if it forces you down onto a worse model. There's a floor underneath all of this too. Somebody got a 2.4 trillion parameter model to produce an answer on a single Spark by leaving most of the weight sitting on disk. 11 seconds per token. It worked, and it is absolutely not a machine you would want to sit down and do a day's work on. None of these launches mention the reason a sealed box looks like such good value right now. 3 companies control something like 90% of the world's memory supply, and they have shifted capacity toward the stacked memory that data center GPUs eat. Consumer prices went vertical as a result. A 128 gigabyte DDR5 kit that bottomed out near $300 is now listed past $3,000, which means a $2,000 sealed box quietly contains more memory than you could buy loose for the same money. That isn't a loophole you've found, though. NVIDIA has already raised the Spark's price and pointed straight at memory supply as the reason. These boxes dodge retail pricing for now, but nobody is dodging the shortage. Everyone reaches for the Chinese EV comparison here. Start cheap, get dismissed as a toy, then win by owning the expensive part of the machine yourself, the way BYD came to own the battery. Half of that maps cleanly, because the model layer is already Chinese and Alibaba now owns the chip, the model, and the cloud underneath it. The other half doesn't. The battery in this analogy is memory plus leading edge manufacturing, and Xiaomi's chips are still made by TSMC, which takes over 70% of the world's contract chip-making revenue, using the same 3 memory suppliers as everybody else. BYD also never had to talk the world's software into supporting a new instruction set, so this may rhyme with the EV story. It's a long way from being guaranteed to repeat it. Which puts us at the actual decision, and this is the part I'd hand back to myself 6 months ago. By now, if there is one specific large open weight model you genuinely need running on your own hardware today, and it fits nowhere else. A $2,000 box with 128 gigabytes will run a 120 billion parameter model at 30 plus tokens a second, and that class of model is clearly where local AI is heading. Don't buy if your model already fits comfortably inside 32 gigabytes, because a good gaming GPU will beat one of these by around 6 times for less money. And whatever you do, don't buy one of these for a large, dense model. 3 tokens a second is what that feels like from the inside, and I can tell you from experience that it's worse than it sounds on paper. Wait if you're shopping off the Chinese announcement specifically, because there is nothing to buy yet. No price, no date, no independent benchmark, and chips landing in 2027. The signal to watch for isn't another keynote. It's the week a serving backend merges support for one of these chips. That's the moment a slide becomes a product. And the rule now taped above my desk: buy hardware for the model you need this month, not the model you're imagining 2 years from now. So here's where I've landed after a week of reading these launches. Whoever wins local AI probably won't be the company with the fastest chip on a slide. It'll be whoever fits the largest useful model into the cheapest box and makes it feel quick while doing it. The widest door, the biggest warehouse that's actually useful, and the cheapest possible building wrapped around them. Which is a slightly strange thought when you remember Xiaomi announced that self-driving car chip on the same stage at a company that will also happily sell you a robot vacuum. The machine answering your hardest questions and the machine bumping into your desk while it does, it might end up sharing a family tree. Try not to think too hard about which one keeps getting firmware updates longer. I'm Ankit, this is The Frontier, AI never sleeps, and neither should your due diligence before you spend $2,000 on a box. See you in the next one.